Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome to the third and final of TCI Oceania's 2020 series for this year. Clusters and Transformational Change is the title of today's webinar. Now, the TCI network, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the leading global cluster practitioner network with members from 110 countries, reaching out to some 9,000 practitioners. And today we're really pleased to welcome delegates from right around the world. We've got South Africa, Thailand, the UK, Ireland, Singapore, Mexico, Spain, New Zealand and others. So welcome all of you, and thanks for joining in to hear about how we're handling things down here, down under in the Oceania region. So my name is Tracy Scott-Remington. I'm a director of the TCI network and a co-chair of the Oceania chapter. Today we were meant to be in a town called Lakes Entrance in Victoria with the Gippsland Food and Fibre cluster and focusing on bushfire recovery. But we've now added COVID-19 to that long list of economic impacts that have been besetting us over this past several years, and we're online. So sorry we can't be with you down there in Gippsland today for those of you online from down there. But to start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country from where this online forum is being offered today and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging. At the end of this online forum, you'll hear from the TCI Network's president, Marette Daniel Nielsen, and she'll tell you a little bit about the new COVID recovery playbook that TCI is currently working on. And I'll leave it to her to share you some of the exciting information coming out of that. But one of the things I would like to say is that what we do know about these crises, like the one we have currently, is that historically they're watershed moments and they have triggered or accelerated existing trends. So making informed choices to retain and build competitiveness, recognising the new realities post-crisis, we believe will enable our clusters to become even stronger and more successful because they are just so well connected. Anyway, today we're very lucky to be able to have as panellists a number of cluster managers from right around the region, the Oceania region, as well as a guest from Canada, and they're going to be telling you what they're doing with their cluster members at the grassroots to start these processes of transformation and working towards new growth and positive futures. Before we start though, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors that have made this online series possible, and that's especially the Industry Growth Centres in Australia of FIAL, Food Innovation Australia Limited, NERA, the National Energy and Resources Agency, and METS Ignited, the Mining Equipment Technology Services, IGC, the Department of Industry, and my home organisation, Regional Development Australia in Brisbane. I'd also like to thank my co-chairs of the Oceania chapter, Nicola Watts, who will be your moderator today from C4 Impact, a former cluster founder and leader, and Mariana Prica, the Managing Director of FIAL. And right now I'll hand over to you, Mariana. I hope you enjoy this online forum.
Thank you, Tracy. I can't seem to see myself, but I'll continue on presenting. Thank you for the kind introduction, and it is great to see so many people that are interested in clusters from across Australia and around the world. So today I'm just going to touch on briefly why clusters are important to the food and agribusiness industry. Australia's food and agribusiness industry is renowned for its ingenuity, has enabled our growers, our farmers and our processors to feed more than 80 million people across Australia and overseas. It is this innovative spark that shall now steer the industry through the constantly changing norms from all the shocks we've had of late, which has become the new way of operating. And this will ensure the industry's existence and its continued contribution towards feeding Australians and contributing to our economy. As you're all aware, Australia is a big country, and in fact, it's the 6th largest country in the world, and it's a little bit behind Canada, who is also present on this online forum today. This means that the approximate 180,000 firms who are operating in the food and agribusiness industry are scattered across a very large geographical area, often in regional cities and remote locations of Australia. While the types of businesses operating in the landscape are dominated by SMEs, in fact, 98% of all firms that employ people are small to medium size, they would benefit greatly from working more closely with other allied firms so they can de-risk their investment and their exposure around chasing opportunities or addressing challenges. That is why clusters are important to our industry, to have a critical mass of like-minded businesses who are cooperating, collaborating in one place and using local knowledge and relationships to address common challenges or opportunities is essential to building the skills and the capabilities of our industry and their readiness to respond to changing market and Australia's harsh climatic conditions. The clusters also act as the invisible glue to connect the fragmented industry of the food and agribusiness sector, and it allows them to connect the different communities of food firms which are scattered across this large country. Finally, I'd like to mention that every year FIAL releases a book to celebrate the great innovations across our industry. This year, the focus is centred on clusters and the great work our food clusters are doing to support our industry to innovate. So please stay connected to us because we'll be releasing a digital copy of this book in July. The relevance of the food industry to us all has been highlighted during the pandemic, and that we all need to eat. So without a food industry, we will be having some challenges. It is time now for greater leadership at all levels to back our clusters as they strive to help our businesses, our regions and cities grow and transform towards positive futures. With that, I'd like to now hand back to my Deputy Co-Chair, Dr. Nicola Watts, who shall moderate this session on transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriana, and thank you, Tracy, and a good afternoon to everyone. Welcome again to this final of 3 online forums presented by TCI Network Oceania. If you've been with us for the previous 2, a very special welcome back. My name is Nicola Watts, and it is again my absolute pleasure to be moderating this session today. I'm coming to you from East Gippsland, a region like many experiencing the disruptions of drought, fire, industry transition, and now COVID-19. As Tracy mentioned, we had hoped that on this day exactly, we would have welcomed you to Lake's entrance for a face-to-face forum. COVID-19 disrupted that. So it's certainly not business as usual, with the challenges for businesses and regions to not only survive these shocks, but also to look at ways to transform in order to build resilience and thrive into the future. But before we launch in, let's just see who we've got online from the online poll. So again, great diversity across clusters, government, industry, research. So we've really got the whole triple or quadruple helix represented here. Predominantly Australian representation, but as Tracy said, we have got a lot of internationals, and thank you for dialing in at odd hours, and strong dominance of food and agribusiness, but great representation across multiple sectors. So thank you for completing the online poll. We will have another one as we move through. Just some housekeeping. We're going to run for around 2 hours. We'll have a quick 2 to 3 minute break in the middle. This session is being recorded, so you will be able to access all of the presentations again after the forum. Please note all participants are on mute, but please make use of the chat and Q&A functions on the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat to introduce yourself to everyone, and thanks to those who have already been doing that, but you can engage with all of the other participants and panelists via the chat. But please also use the Q&A function to pose questions to speakers. We plan to have Q&A at the end and where everyone can participate, but also please feel free to direct questions to specific people during the forum and they will try to answer as we move along. Now, following on from the previous themes of shock and survive, today in this third session, we're exploring the theme of transform. Our first session set the stage of the shockwaves associated with COVID-19 that are rippling through our countries, regions and businesses. The second session, titled Survive, saw a focus on the importance of collective and distributed leadership and governance. We also heard some inspiring stories of how clusters across Australia, Oceania and around the globe are responding to these challenges. Today, we're going to hear more, particularly about transformational work being undertaken and the important role of clusters within that. We've decided to go with more speakers rather than less, as an opportunity to put the spotlight on some of this great work. We're going to head to Canada for a 30-minute keynote, and that will be followed by very, very short, sharp presentations from across Australia. So you really are only going to get a very small taste of some of this work. So can I encourage you to be active on the chat and direct questions to specific panelists. I know panelists will also not mind if you follow up with them directly after today's forum. So let's head off to Canada, a long way from us, but certainly many similarities with Australia. Bill Gruhl is CEO of Protein Industries Canada. Bill, Mariana, Tracy and I were in Toronto in late 2018 at the TCI conference when your minister outlined a massive investment in clustering. I believe at that time you had been in the job for just 1 week. We're sorry you can't be with us here in person today, but thank you for joining us online. And we're really looking forward to hearing about your work and your work over the last couple of years. Over to you, Bill.
Great, thank you, Nicola, for the kind introduction, and Mariana for the invitation. Yeah, I'm joining you today from Regina, Saskatchewan, the heart of the prairies, and it's right into planting season for us. It's a very exciting time. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Innovation Supercluster Initiative, which is really the Government of Canada's approach to a new approach to innovation policy in Canada. I'll be speaking about the need for innovation and clustering activities specific to the agriculture and food sector, but I just want to set a little context as I work through this slide deck to give you a sense that I'm one of 5 superclusters that Nicola talked about that was announced back in 2018. And so I work in the food and agriculture space. That's what I'm going to be speaking about. I'm glad to see that 61% of the participants are from that industry. But know that the Government of Canada made a very bold policy initiative with the creation of the Innovation Supercluster Initiative and earmarked and invested $1 billion in 5 different areas of the Canadian economy where we feel we can be global leaders. So I represent food and agriculture. There is a supercluster in Canada focused on monetizing our ocean resources, another one focused on the digital economy, a third one focused on advanced manufacturing and automation in the manufacturing sector, and finally another supercluster focused on the growth of supply chain logistics using artificial intelligence. So again, 5 areas where Canada feels that we can be global leaders. Again, I'm going to bring this back and speak about the industry that I am most familiar with. But I think the concepts that I'm going to talk about around how the role of clustering is helping grow the agriculture and food processing sector in Canada, namely collaboration, a need to increase investment in science and innovation in Canada, a need to focus on interdisciplinary research, a need to take a more value chain approach to research and development, and really this ability to take on and exploit the natural advantages that Canada has is true for all 5 of the superclusters across the nation of Canada. So just keep that in mind if you're not necessarily from the agriculture sector today. The concepts in the backdrop behind which drove the formation of the Innovation Supercluster Initiative is I think, true for the 5 sectors of the economy that we are focused on in Canada. So I'm going to tell a bit of a story in four chapters. One is around the need for change. Then another is around the global opportunity for plant protein and what's driving that. I'll make a little bit of comment on the Canadian advantage and why this is such an important investment for Canada, but I'll try to focus most of my time on the role of clustering and what we're trying to do at Protein Industries Canada. So, of course, I'm a farm kid. I'm from Western Canada. For those of you who have been here, it's you can't take the farm out of the farm boy. So this is pictures of my farm. My grandfather came to Canada in 1912 and settled right in the heart of the prairies. And in his first year of farming, broke 60 acres of land and planted flax. This is a picture of our farm in 1952. Again, in 1987, some really tough years farming in those times. We talk about some of the transportation issues we have. If you can see it in the picture in 1952, is of course a horse-drawn grain cart, and that's how my grandfather had to start moving grain. 1987, that was the year before the driest year on record in Western Canada. Yields were about 10% of average, but our farm survived. 2017, that picture, we're in a wet cycle right now in Western Canada. Some areas of our farm we were not able to plant in the last couple of years. But you know, the agriculture sector has survived and thrived despite anything that's been thrown at it in Western Canada for the last century. It doesn't matter if it was environmental challenges, some issues related to domestic policy. There was times when we were suffering very high interest rates. I remember my father bringing home a tractor in 1982, and he was paying 22% interest rate on that piece of equipment. There's always been agronomic challenges. There's always been transportation challenges. We've always had cost of production challenges in the agriculture sector in Western Canada, but we have been successful. Canada's got a very successful agriculture sector. We are one of 5 jurisdictions that is a global net exporter of food, but we've been successful by getting better at what we would call commodity agriculture. We produce more, we've learned to produce it cheaper, and we've learned to get it to market more efficiently. We do very little value-added processing and very little food production in Canada on a global basis. We are one of the world's largest exporters of agricultural commodities, but we're only 8th globally in agri-food exports, which means we're doing very little in terms of value add and bringing opportunity out of the products that we're producing in Western Canada. And you know, that model has served us very well over the last century, but the world is changed. And you know, Nicola made mention of this. We've got it's a very, very interesting time in agriculture and agri-food systems across the globe. We're suffering global trade system upheaval and disruption. For those of you not overly familiar with Canadian agriculture, right now we have some trade disruption with major trading partners in China and India. And it's not always related to agriculture. It can be other geopolitical forces that are reducing our ability to trade. We're witnessing expanding customer demand. For years in Canada, we have sent commodities overseas, and we have a reputation as a global supplier of safe, nutritious, healthy, and environmentally sustainable food. But customers are starting to ask questions about whether or not we can prove that. And so we've got new customer needs and new customer demands coming at us on a daily basis. And of course, what's on the top of everyone's mind today is COVID-19 and the supply chain disruption that we're seeing in the agri-food systems across the globe. And so if you think about where we came from in agriculture in Western Canada, producing it more efficiently and getting it to market more efficiently, that's allowed us to grow a very healthy agriculture sector in the world as it was. The world today is a very different place, and we're not going to be able to deal with and manage global trade system disruptions and COVID-19 supply chain challenges by continuing down that same vein. And so I would contend that what built our sector in the past won't grow our sector into the future. And for us in Canada, when we looked at what is the need for the sector was great. And I'll bring this back to the importance of clustering. And I think what you'll see here is that you really need a new approach to economic growth and economic development in order to deal with the issues and challenges that we're facing in the agri-food sector in Canada today. We need to increase our resilience to trade system disruption in Canadian agriculture. We need to help transition to a digital economy so that we can meet those end-use customer demands for information. We need to evolve to meet new and emerging customer demands. We have to create and capture value at home. And this is critical for us. If you look at the statistics for Canada in terms of our investment in science and innovation across all sectors of the economy and all levels of government, academia, and the private sector, we're investing about 1/2 of the OECD average in science and innovation relative to other nations globally. We need to reinvest in innovation, we need to create and capture value at home, and we need to ensure relevance and influence in our global agri-food system. And I would contend that these new approaches that we need to adopt cannot be achieved and accomplished without a new approach. And I'm a firm believer that that new approach is at the heart of what we're trying to do at Protein Industries Canada and built on the theories around clustering activity. So that's the first chapter of the story. That's the need for change. And what is really this global opportunity that we're talking about? You know, as much as we're facing challenging times in the global agri-food sector, there's unprecedented opportunity in front of us today. The world will need to produce as much food in the next 45 years as it did in the previous 10,000. That's almost a sobering statistic. I do believe that agriculture globally has the ability and opportunity to do that, but I just want everyone to keep that in the back of their mind as we talk about this. I've just talked about some of the challenges that the sector is facing. We'll get to how I believe that clustering is helping us achieve that. But really, you know, for me, this is a driver in terms of why we get up in the morning and why we work in the agriculture sector. It's just so critical that we get this right in the agriculture sector. And now the Canadian advantage. This is chapter 3. So we've got the history and the impetus for change. We've got the global opportunity, which is the need for food driven by growth in global population and increasing customer demands for plant protein. So here enters Western Canada and what we can bring to the table. Western Canada's a vast geography. For those of you who've been here, we're sitting on 60 million acres of land. We produce, on average, 70 million metric tons of crops per year. We just finished planting season in Western Canada. It's my favorite time of year in the agriculture sector. We produce 27 million metric tons of wheat. We are the world's largest producer and exporter of canola, which is our largest protein crop in Western Canada. We're the world's largest exporter of pulse crops. We are the world's largest exporter of flax, and we have a number of non-protein based crops as well. So if you think about the impetus for change, the global opportunity around plant protein, and the ability for us in Western Canada to service that industry by producing 14 million metric tons of protein per year, the stars are kind of aligning for this new approach. So then enters Protein Industries Canada. So we're a couple of years old, but our vision is that Canada is a world leader in plant protein. And I'll spend the bulk of my time now talking about us as an organization and what it is that we're doing and why clustering and the activities we're undertaking are critical to this sector. So we're working to transform an industry in Western Canada. With our partners over the next 4 years, we'll be investing $300 million to transform our value-added processing sector. And I'll talk specifically about those investments. We're doing this by creating connections and inspiring collaborations across the ag and food processing sector. The investments that we make at Protein Industries Canada, there is a requirement that more than one company is collaborating in that research and development work. We're bringing in post-secondary institutions and government labs into this research and incenting that work. And we really do believe that we need to do business differently. We need to leverage our strengths and drive innovation and remove barriers to explore new opportunities. And I'll dig into each of these themes a little bit over the remaining portion of my talk. So the investments that we're making, and just for those of you who might not be familiar with the investment that the Government of Canada made to create the superclusters, my particular organization's been entrusted with $153 million from the Government of Canada, and we're co-investing that on a one-to-one basis with for-profit private sector companies to develop new technologies, new products, and new services to grow the value-added processing sector. That will be the bulk of our investments, the creation of new intellectual property, new processes, new technologies, new services, all aimed at unlocking the value of the crops that we're producing in Western Canada. We think it's easily tens of billions of dollars of wealth that we can create for Canada by making these targeted investments. The vast majority of our investments will go into this technology side, but then we also have what we call capacity building, and this is what we believe is for lack of a better term, the secret sauce behind creating a competitive, sustainable business environment in which to launch, commercialize, and take advantage of the new knowledge and technologies that we've created with our technology investments. And I'll speak specifically to what our priorities are around ensuring that we're creating a competitive and sustainable business environment. So for us in the agriculture and food processing sector, we take what's called a value chain approach to co-investment. And we have 4 distinct areas of the agriculture and food value chain where we make investments. And we span everything from plant breeding work under CREATE to primary production investments in digitization of agriculture on farm under the grow section. Under what we term MAKE, this is advanced processing technologies, the development of new products, new co-products, waste stream utilization. The bulk of our investments are made in this area that we call MAKE, which is advanced processing technologies. And then finally, the cell category. So for us in Western Canada, this is really critical. 90% of what we produce in Western Canada today, we do not consume. We are a large agricultural area with a very sparse population. We have to be focused on our end-use customer. We have to be focused on the development of novel food ingredients and novel feed ingredients. So everything we do, whether it is backed up in the value chain under CREATE or GROW or MAKE, there has to be an element of how it is that that end use product is utilized and commercialized in the marketplace. It's critical for us. And I think, again, that's another element of why clustering is so critical for us as we grow the agriculture and food processing sector in Canada. So I want to spend a few minutes highlighting the types of investments that we're making. I've just pulled up a few of them. I think a few takeaways here. One is maybe the names of the companies aren't that important. I think what's important is the scale of investment that we're making. We really believe in transformative science and innovation. We really believe that we need to take large bets on projects that will drive and transform the industry. So what you'll see here is research and development projects that span 1 to 3 years in duration. They're anywhere from $2 to $20 million. And I think the other thing that you might want to take away from this is the idea that we've got companies from different verticals of the value chain. So if you remember the create, grow, make, and sell approach that we're taking to investment, we're always trying to bring together companies from those different areas. So one of these projects, for instance, the one that is Merit, the $19 million project there, we're helping that company research and develop functional plant proteins from peas and canola, which are commodities that we produce here at scale in Western Canada that nobody else globally produces. Merit is the company that's doing the processing research. But on one end of that value chain, we've added in Futura Seeds, which is a seed company working on the genetics so that we understand the implications of the breeding program on the processing technology. And then on the other end of the value chain, we brought in an organization called the Winning Combination, which is focused on the development of novel foods and consumer packaged goods. So that creates a line of sight from the customer-facing Winning Combination right back to the plant breeder and bringing the processor in it. And that idea of multidisciplinary research, collaborative research, and research that spans different verticals of the value chain is one of the backbones of how we invest at Protein Industries Canada and why we think this approach will give us great gains in the growth of the value-added processing sector. So there's a couple of other projects that I don't think I have time to spend on because I'd like to leave time for questions and I don't want to take time away from my other speakers. But again, I think what you're seeing is the scale of investments that we're making, the willingness of companies to engage in doing business differently, the excitement that is being seen in Western Canada around not only the opportunity, but really the concept of clustering. And I think what we've seen is a reluctance of companies to partner together until you really start to talk about what that means and what is the art of the possible. And so what we've seen, and I'll come back to a number in the future around what we're calling the collaboration index. So what you're seeing, these first couple of projects that we've funded is 2 and 3 and maybe 4 organizations working together. As we get more into the development of projects and the theory is proving out around clustering, we're getting 5 and 6 and 7 organizations collaborating on R&D. And so if you ever want a live example of does clustering theory work, if you invest in it, come and see what we're doing here in Western Canada in the agriculture and value-added and food processing sector. So to date, Protein Industries Canada, we've made 11 placements. Our total project value is $153 million. We've invested almost $80 million of our own funds to grow this value-added processing sector. And so that's the technology side. That's really what it is that we need to drive the sector. But I want to flip now to this concept of the ecosystem priorities, because when we started out building the supercluster and thinking about the investments we needed to make, we knew it wasn't enough to just say, hey, we're going to create some new knowledge and new technologies and new intellectual properties, and companies are going to work together and it's all going to be fine. We knew that we also needed to ensure that we had a highly competitive business environment in which to commercialize that technology. And what makes a highly competitive business environment? Well, there's lots of factors. For us, when we talked to our members and when we looked at what we needed to be competitive relative to other nations that want to take a piece of the plant protein market globally, we settled on these 6 priorities. Access to capital. Our companies are highly innovative. They are early stage revenue or pre-stage revenue, short on physical assets and long on intellectual assets. And so we need to help them access capital markets. We're doing a lot of work with the venture capital community to ensure that we've got access to growth and risk capital. Regulatory modernization for us, I'm sure like many of you on the phone today, if you are working in the agriculture and food processing industry, you know that food and food production and food processing is a highly regulated industry. Canada is no exception. We've got a lot of work to do there to make our regulatory system work better for our member companies. We've got a lot of work that we're doing on data and information communication technology management and intellectual property literacy. We've done a number of surveys with our members, and their understanding of how to utilize data as a strategic asset to drive better business decisions, and their understanding of how to create, protect, and exploit intellectual property really spans the gamut from very little knowledge to very good knowledge. We need to raise the boat on understanding of IP literacy and data literacy across all of our members. Infrastructure enhancement, I think most people on the phone today or on the video today would know that infrastructure is key to growing a healthy sector. And so we're doing a lot of work ensuring that we have research and development infrastructure, but also toll processing infrastructure. For us, this idea of brand and international engagement is critical. I've said it before, we are a net exporter of food, and so we're highly conscientious of our international brand in Canada, and we're doing a lot of work to understand that and make sure that we understand our end-use customer demands. I've got just a few slides left, but I think to me, if we've done anything at Protein Industries Canada, it is that we've really inspired companies and academic institutions to collaborate on research and development. So the average project today has 8.2 project participants, an average of 3-4 private sector companies, really a great linkage to public institutions. That's federal government labs, provincial government labs, universities and academic institutions. The snowball is really starting to roll for us in Western Canada around this idea of collaborative R&D. And to me, this is more important now in a post-COVID-19 world than it ever has been. Working capital is very tight for our private sector members. And so any time that they can collaborate on R&D, any time that they can leverage the strengths of another company in the sector, any time that they can leverage the strength of a public institution and don't have to invest in that R&D infrastructure in their own organization is going to be a good day. And so, this idea of us responding to COVID-19, I think the idea of collaborative R&D and specialization and working together is more critical today than it's ever been. So we are a member-driven organization with 190 members in Western Canada. We run the gamut from seed companies to ag manufacturing, and really focused on this idea of growing the value-added processing sector with kind of 3 things in mind. We know we need to increase investment in science and innovation in Canada. We know that we need a new approach to economic growth, and the backbones that underpin that for us is collaboration in research and development and better utilization of our R&D infrastructure. and we know that we need to stay focused on our export and end-use customer demands, all of which I think are being driven and really, really serviced well by the clustering model that we've created at Protein Industries Canada. So for us, for success, we want to move from commodity supplier to ingredient provider. We know and we think we can achieve 35% of the value of the global trade in plant protein by 2035. And we know that we can grow from 8th in global food exports to 5th. We've got our sights on $85 billion in food exports. Today we're at about 75. And we want to increase our domestic sales. And this is a critical one too. Most nations are thinking about food sovereignty today in the post-COVID-19 world. We're thinking about that in Canada too. So I want to thank again Mariana for the invitation to speak, and Nicola for the kind introduction, and I will pass it back to Nicola.
Thank you very much, Bill, and for sharing so much information there and so much to digest there, I think, as well. Really talking about your members right across the value chain, your collaboration index, that sounds a fascinating area to do a deeper dive into, but also your focus right across the entire ecosystem and your priorities there to drive that kind of bigger systemic shift in order to achieve transformation. I can see there are a couple of questions. I'm very mindful of the time, but I think there's an important question popped up here in relation to, you did touch on IP, but how do you deal with that? What are the ownership arrangements for IP that is developed through the cluster?
Yeah, so we've taken a very hands-off approach. So even though I'm investing up to 50% of the funds in a research project, we have deferred the ownership of the intellectual property to the R&D consortium that creates it. I truly believe that as a not-for-profit organization, our goal is, and our focus and is not going to be the commercialization of intellectual property. That is best handled by the private sector. And so we do ask that private sector members think about the intellectual property they're creating, inform other members of the ecosystem about the intellectual property, agree to engage in discussions about the wide commercialization of it, but we do not take an ownership stake in the IP. That's best left in the hands of the private sector.
Great, thank you. And I can see there's a question filtering to the top. There seems to be a lot of interest in your collaboration index. Now, you probably haven't got time to go into that now, but is that something that you would be prepared to share and discuss? Because I guess that's one of the biggest challenges that we all face is around developing and assessing the level of a collaborative culture that underpins a cluster.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, we've been very deliberate about this. And one of the things that we've said is, in order to receive funding from Protein Industries Canada, one of the consortium members must be a small and medium-sized enterprise, because we've got a real theory that you know, we've got a lot of large anchor firms and multinational companies that can bring along and nurture the growth of our SME culture in Canada. And so that's worked very well. It's not always been easy to put companies together in collaborative R&D. I could spend a whole hour talking about the challenges of that, but the idea of collaboration underpins everything that we're doing here.
Great. Unfortunately, we will have to leave it there for the time being.
Yep.
Thank you again, but please stay with us for the Q&A at the end, Bill. Participants, please all give Bill a virtual clap of appreciation. And participants, if you would like to continue to pose some questions to Bill in the Q&A, please do so, and Bill will try and respond to those as we move through. So before moving on to our other cluster and transformational speakers, Dr. Gary Saliba is going to just give us a quick insight or recap into the concept of transformation. Transform. it's just another one of those words we all toss around, but it's often has different meanings for different people, particularly when we are talking about leading change. Certainly all transformation involves change, but not all change is transformational. Most change involves fixing the past, whereas transformation, and the kind of transformation that Bill has been talking about here, is clearly about creating the future, and it involves deep systemic shifts. Gary, please tell us a little bit more about different levels of change.
Thank you, Nicola. Thanks for the introduction. Okay, I'd like to contextualize transformation in the higher concept of change. And to do that, I'd like to introduce two categories of change. The first is first order change, and sometimes we use the word resilience under that. And then the second word is second order change, of which we see a number of other words that reflect that kind of change. And one of them, of course, is their transformation. So to give you a sense of the transformation and the meaning of it, I'd like to first of all address the topic of first order change and then get onto the topic of second order change. I'm sure you're aware of a number of situations where you'd like to see things happening differently. And in those situations, you devise a particular initiative or set of initiatives, and you put them into practice, and lo and behold, after a short period of time, or maybe a long period of time, you'll see the results that you want and the behaviors that you want to see. And that's well and good. But there are situations, maybe on a personal, social, business, and even on a national, international level, where we recognize that the changes or the interventions we put into place don't seem to get the results that we want. And the harder we attempt those initiatives, the less the direction that we want to get to. And so we find that even the interventions become major problems in their own right. And at that point, we need to think very differently and use a different approach. And I think Bill's given us some great examples of where we need to do when that happens. So to move on and consider the issues around first order, I'd like to highlight that there are issues that we can't necessarily deal with first order thinking. We'll come back to that. But in terms of first order change, let's consider some of the principles of that. When first order change is good when the need for it is present in the situation that we're working with. And so in terms of principles of first order change, we're looking at incremental steps. We're looking at consistency with the prevailing values, norms, and beliefs of the people that are involved. The solutions and the problem is defined within the existing paradigms and the ways of thinking. We use extension of past knowledge and current knowledge, and we implement current skills and knowledge to make these interventions happen. And it's advantageous to a range of stakeholders. Now, with these principles applied to a problem that that is appropriate for these principles, we get the following happening. We get change that occurs within the system, and the system itself doesn't change at all. And so that's quite acceptable, assuming that we're using these principles for something that is relevant. But when we start to see problems such as domestic violence, disadvantaged Indigenous people, and the escalation of deaths in the US and other countries during COVID-19, we start to ask ourselves, do these kinds of approaches really are really valid for these kinds of problems? The other aspect of change, first order change, sorry, I'm just getting a problem with my slide. Okay, so the other expectation we have from first order change is that the system doesn't provide the rules from which change happens. As long as we're aware of that, then the initiatives from a first order change set of principles are effective. And finally, from a first order change perspective, there is an expectation that traditional solutions will always suffice. So again, according to the principles from first order change, we're looking at initiatives that change from one behaviour to another within a given way of behaving. And that's acceptable when we're looking at problems that are relevant with first order change. And a phrase I'm sure many of you are aware, the more things change, the more things stay the same. And that's very relevant in the context of a first order change, because that's what we're expecting to see. Now, from an area of complex theory, complex adaptive systems, there's a whole lot more to it, but I'll leave this for another day in describing first order change. What does first order change mean for clusters? Well, it means businesses focus on what is working. The rules of engagement are followed. There's improvement in process and procedures from a continuous improvement perspective. Everyone agrees with the changes that are implemented. New products and markets are developed within the current knowledge and skills. The cluster champions growth and development for given products and markets. Cluster leaders are information bankers. Cluster members are passive recipients of information. And these are all relevant and okay as long as we're working in a world where there's not much change in the markets and there's not a great deal of expectations on the industry and or the cluster. And you may want to look at these points again later on in relation to the clusters you're working in and ask yourself, to what extent are we working from these perspectives or not? Oh, there's also an administrative approach to working with members. Now, the other key element of first order change is that the cluster leads maintaining the cluster identity. And when we work with first order change, we are taking on an identity of and the classic characteristics of first order. And that's okay, again, in context. But when we come to problems that require a different approach, where we find that the initiatives that we're putting into place aren't working, we need a different way of thinking and working. And that's where second order change comes into place. And this is the time where we use the word transformation. And transformation, if we look at the word, has two parts to it: transform, so it's to change form, change the structure, change the nature. And I'm sure you're all aware about Uber and Airbnb and how they've radically changed and transformed new ways of thinking, new ways of working in the taxi and accommodation industry around the world. Steve Jobs, with the introduction of the iPhone, has transformed, has radically changed how we operate, how we connect with each other, how we share information, and how we access information. These are very different approaches to the past. Now, the principles of second order change are like this. We break with the past, and there's a dramatic departure from the expected. Thinking is outside existing paradigms, and the thinking and working is beyond the current ways, to the extent that it is very, very different to what we know from the usual ways of thinking and working. And second order change and transformation requires conflicts with prevailing values, norms, and beliefs. We no longer can accept the values and beliefs of the current ways of thinking and working. And it requires new knowledge and skills to implement. But also what's important is with transformation, it is unclear that what we're doing will actually make things better and what the future will look like. The process is emergent. Second order change and transformation is about a different state of being. It's about changing the form, the structure of the system. And there are dramatic departures from the expected, both in defining the problem and finding a solution. So it's not just in the solution space, but it's also about reframing the problem altogether. So from a first order change perspective, transformation and second order change is unpredictable, abrupt, paradoxical, and illogical. And it also is concerned with altering the fundamental ways. The offerings and the dramatic shift in direction require new ways of thinking and action. And unlike first order change, we see here with second order change and transformation that we are changing from one way of behaving to a totally different way of behaving. Again, from complex systems theory, very quickly, that in first order change, the ball sits within a valley there, and the ball doesn't really move out of the valley when it's disturbed. But with second order change, what we notice is the ball actually goes from one valley to another, where we see a totally different identity state, a different regime, different characteristic, different rules for operating. And this is a critical point when we look at transformation. In terms of examples we've seen for second order change, the global movement of regenerative agriculture, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, are seeing a huge paradigm shift from competing with nature to partnering with nature. Here we see a great example of transformation, changing the form of agriculture and how it's shifting from a industrial chemical-based approach to a more holistic approach that partners with nature. There was a major farmer that I was working with in the sheep industry. He once thought about his business as growing sheep. He now sees his business very much around soil health, and that has actually changed the very nature of his business models and the way he operates his business. Most recently, the Australian Prime Minister has said we are now resetting the economy, and it was quite gratifying to hear that, because in a post-COVID world, the rules are changing, and this is an opportunity to change the very rules of how our economy works as well. And to just explore what second order change and transformation means for clusters, it means the distributed leadership of model for cluster leaders become more coordinators and facilitators. Cluster leaders are catalyzing higher levels of consciousness and awareness. And because of that, we can start to get information about shifts in beliefs about individuals, businesses, and the cluster itself. Cluster leaders and communities and the community within it start to create disturbances, because without disturbances, nothing will change. Cluster leaders in the community co-evolve new language, and that new language is part of creating the disturbance. It's about raising people's higher levels of consciousness and awareness, and challenging and creating new belief systems and a diversity of beliefs and values to be challenged. A key element here that cluster leaders as facilitators of cultural change and identity shifts. As I've said, unless you are able to take on a new identity, transformation will not happen in the cluster and cannot be facilitated. And that leads to a practice of co-evolution between the clusters and its members of its community and the broader industry, and to establish the conditions to enable others to join the cluster. And this is the big point around collaboration that Bill was talking about. And that collaboration is for radical shifts in products, markets, and business processes. So to recap, transformation and second order change is about shifts in belief systems. It's about radical new ways of thinking and working beyond the ways we've been doing so in the past. It's about people being able to undertake identity shifts and hence new beliefs and values in how they are operating and conducting their business. I hope that helps in understanding the word transformation. Thank you for the opportunity. And back to you, Nicola.
Thank you so much, Gary. I know you could talk in much more detail about this topic, but we won't be able to take questions just with our time constraints, but plenty of food for thought there for everyone. And for everyone to think about, I guess, where you and your cluster might be operating in terms of those first and second order change areas. I think we all appreciate that the second order change is really the potential sweet spot, but it is a challenging space, and the role of a cluster manager is to a certain extent to be quite disruptive. So a virtual clap for Gary, please, and please direct any questions that you might have or you'd like to follow up with Gary in the online Q&A. So we're now going to link some of the theory back to the practical. We've got a terrific lineup of panellists who are leading some amazing transformational initiatives across Australia and across a range of sectors. 5 minutes each is not going to do justice to their work, but it will provide you with an insight and hopefully hopefully facilitate some new connections across clusters and other groups. We're going to hear about some more of the drivers of transformation, the role of clusters, and ways of working to support transformation, and also perhaps consider some of the barriers and enablers of these transformative initiatives. To kickstart this, we're going to head to Tasmania. Kim Seagram, a very busy businesswoman who is also the chair of Fermentas. Kim, please give us an insight into some of the work that's occurring through Fermentas.
Thanks very much, Nicola. Now, to put things in context, Tasmania is an island, off an island, in the middle of nowhere. Because we are so remote, we have to be able to create our future. It speaks to our resourceful islandness. A focus on raw resources, both forestry and mineral, will only get us so far. And while great for the national export trade balance, not so good at creating SMEs. Since colonization, agriculture and tourism have been helping drive the economy. Much of our agricultural produce goes offshore as commodity products, the price taker model. For example, in Tasmania, who produces about 10% of Australia's milk, over 90% of our milk is dried and becomes globally traded undifferentiated milk powder from some of the best dairy in the world. We need to seek value to our produce here before it leaves our shores to extract maximum value within Australia. With all we do, we need to focus on local strengths and be globally good at what we do. We need smart specialization, like fermentation. Fermentation is that delicious alchemy which transforms barley into beer, milk into cheese, grapes into wine, and cabbage into kimchi through the applied use of microbes, those fabulous little bacteria, yeast, and fungi, not the nasty ones like the virus out there now. With our wine, whiskey, beer, and cider, we are globally respected. We need to do this with our dairy products, from our cheese to a kefir, and create a pickle culture and share our fermented vegetables with our neighbors from Eastern Europe through Asia. And what is a food culture without good sourdough? Placemaking projects are needed, and now more than ever, as the stimulus going forward of this COVID crisis, roads are great, but economic drivers which help shape the economy and build new businesses are our future. Ferment Tasmania will help create that step change in the agri-food sector in Australia. It will help facilitate the development of new products, which will create new businesses and grow existing ones. It will provide space and intellectual grunt behind commercially focused research, marrying academia and industry into the same facility, assisting in those collaborative sparks that lead to innovation. We had one fabulous example of an industry session that we had together, and one of our sourdough makers and one of our sparkling wine makers sat down to have a bit of a conversation and try one of her bubbles before it was released at the end. And it was just a lovely way of the two of them not only networking together, but the sourdough guy had not been able to get his bread rising and his starter had failed. The sparkling wine producer said, listen, I've got the solution for you. So they ended up finishing off the bottle of bubbles, tipped the rest of the lees into the bread, and he had bread to sell at the market the next day. Just one of those little collaborative stories. But Ferment Tasmania will also create new skills and training opportunities which create new career paths in the food production sector linked to fermentation. The University of Tasmania has already implemented their 2-year applied science degree with a specialization in fermentation. We want to help create new agri-food tourism experiences, from an afternoon making a fresh cheese all the way through to an entire vintage with one of our fabulous winemakers. These are authentic experiences for our visitors and for those interested in trying out the industry to see if they want to get involved. 2 years ago, we knew nothing about clusters until the gorgeous E4 brought his fabulous 2-day workshop to Launceston, and the light bulb went on. As we looked at the typical path a cluster takes, we recognized we were on this journey, which was so exciting as it dovetailed beautifully with our collaborative style and has provided us with a framework on how to develop going forward and how to keep the clutter helping along on our journey. But being this disrupted takes patience, it takes resilience, it takes tenacity, it takes the ability to collaborate really constructively. It takes a bit of Teflon coating and a good dab of industry and community glue to help keep it all together. We want to create an entrepreneurial culture. We can't rely on big business to employ everyone, nor do we want to. We need to create a safe space to create new businesses and help them on the journey to success. Plug into areas where they don't have strengths, or connect them to those who do to minimize those failures. And while we need good governance and compliance, it's essential that we have an appetite for risk to take on those challenges to create these step changes. We need to help show how we can create a highly sustainable model, a circular economy around our food production facilities, where waste, both in production and on farm, becomes a resource. Going forward in this new COVID world, we need our businesses to be responsive and nimble to take advantage of opportunities, but mostly we need to be brave and push those boundaries. But we also need to be kind and take those around you who want to be on the journey with you. Thank you for your time today, and back to you, Nicola.
Thanks so much, Kim. Your passion for what you do certainly shines through. It certainly seems that Fermentaz is not only transforming food, but you're transforming culture and capability and some amazing work. Please stay for the Q&A, and I'm hoping that people will perhaps generate some questions online. Thank you. Time to now head off to Queensland, to Mets Ignited. Cluster Development Manager Sergio Zachariah, over to you.
Thank you, Nicola. It's my pleasure today to introduce the Resources Industry Cluster. My name is Sergio Zachariah and I'm the Cluster Development Manager. We are a young cluster group that's an initiative of the Queensland Government and Mets Ignited. Mets Ignited is one of the 6 federal industry growth centres, and it's tasked with supporting the mining equipment technology sector, which is worth around $90 billion to the Australian economy. To date, the group has generated 3 cluster groups, had over 22 major events, 825 attendees, and comprises of over 200 organisations. I've been blessed to have most key elements that are needed to be leading a successful cluster network: people, champions, deep and wide skills, enthusiasm and broad industry support. This has led to a number of commercial projects that are gaining momentum and a great pipeline of future projects. So there's currently about 6 collaborative projects that are work in progress, and anticipated commercial activity within the next 12 to 18 months will be greater than $25 million, and that the jobs growth will exceed 50 full-time roles. Just to put some perspective on it, the program cost is about $1 million, so that has a conservative return on investment of about 25 to 1. While we're in a global health crisis that is quickly becoming a global economic challenge, and Australia has been spared the worst of the health crisis, how we manage the economic fallout is in many ways a choice. I'd like to share a personal story of a startup company I was involved with about 15 years ago, Transform Business Systems. By all metrics, this company was a great success. Started in late 2005 as a 2-person startup. By early 2007, it had 12 staff and over $1 million of turnover. I became the general manager of that organisation in mid-2008. Then something happened in September 2008, the global financial crisis. Our revenue dropped to 50% and it stayed there. And I was quickly looking at a business burning through 2 years of retained profits and its overdraft. I had months to stabilise our position. There was a time to choose a path, crisis or opportunity. The lessons I learned during the GFC are key to how the Resources Cluster Network is being supported today, to not only survive through this time, but to thrive. SMEs, which is a large portion of the network, don't always have the business robustness or the depth of experience to survive a major downturn. A healthy cluster network will, by default, continue to deliver great outcomes for many years, and this is my focus today. Tools to adapt. I'm facilitating businesses to get support in a number of key areas. One, know your metrics, measure everything with a high focus on cash flow and projections. This is probably the key to the survival of my business during the GFC. By engaging a seasoned mentor or coach who has navigated a downturn or two, businesses will need to adapt fast to match cash flow and seize any opportunity and cover losses. Education is another key part of it. We have all seen the rapid changes that online meetings have thrust upon us, and they are mostly positive. Online courses and tutorials are helping businesses with holes in their knowledge to upskill, to adapt, to think outside the box, and to strengthen their financial and marketing and sales knowledge. A number of businesses will also need a dynamic review of what's working, what's not, and have fast strategies. Win fast, lose fast, on how to stay solvent and grow out of this. Review business models or at least large chunks of it frequently based on this moving feast that we are dealing with. And the last point that I've been working with on the cluster group quite extensively is business development. Doubling down within the cluster network. Focus on your existing and past clients, and at every opportunity, cross-sell, upsell, value add, and broaden the scope of your offering. Most importantly, use the cluster network as your friends in the business. Ask the question and offer your services within the network. It is an opportunity to double down your activities, as this is low-hanging fruit for business development. In the short time that I have today, I just want to finish off with, on reflection, the changes made in a time of real difficulty during the GFC may transform business systems far stronger and sustainably increase its profits by over 70% in the succeeding years. In challenging times, we must question the accepted reality because things will go wrong quickly. Rapid answers are needed, and the solutions may well be found outside our normal compass. With good management and great support, the cluster network will thrive and continue to deliver long-term economic growth and thrive in a crisis. Thank you. And over to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Sergio, and for giving us your insights into how Mets Ignited is responding to this crisis. Now, again, I'm really mindful of time, so stay with us for the Q&A. I'm going to try and get one more speaker before we stop for a quick break. So let's go quickly straight to Sydney and Cluster Manager Stephanie Thornton. Let's hear about what's happening at the Australian Ocean Energy Group.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today and introduce you to renewable ocean energy. My name is Stephanie Thornton. I'm the cluster manager for the Australian Ocean Energy Group. We are a national cluster whose mission is to accelerate commercialization of Australia's ocean energy sector. Sorry. There we go. Just getting used to the technology. As I said, we're a cluster. Our mission is to accelerate the commercialization of Australia's ocean energy sector, which is a new sector in the energy field in Australia. For those of you who may not be familiar with renewable ocean energy, it is a capture of the massive amount of energy from the natural movement of the oceans. In our case, that's the waves and the tides, and transferring that energy into electricity. These are some of the images of wave and tidal technologies that are being developed by our members. The formation of our cluster was driven by our industry in response to a couple of really key challenges. First, an ocean energy sector did not previously exist in Australia, which resulted in these technology pioneers working in isolation and without a complement of resources to support development. So there was really a void of collaboration to support innovation. And that was, again, one of the things that we wanted to create the cluster in order to respond to that need. Another driver behind formation of our cluster was in response to the growing movement and transition to low carbon solutions. The reason that we established a cluster and not a peak body is because the cluster structure enables us to build an end-to-end value chain. And in turn, we hope that we're driving towards having that end-to-end value chain lead to a very strong stakeholder community. What is unique and exciting about ocean energy is that there's a diverse range of potential applications for ocean energy technologies. Unlike solar and wind sectors, which have evolved a more standardized technology, there will not be a one-size-fits-all technology in our sector. And the reason is because of the diversity of these types of market opportunities. And this does present a great opportunity for collaboration and innovation, and not just within our sector, but also sector to sector and cluster to cluster. Many of these new and targeted market opportunities for ocean energy have some of their own clusters that are being developed, such as the hydrogen. There's a new hydrogen cluster that's in formation, as an example, and one in the offshore energy sector as well. So fundamentally, the key driving force behind our transformative work is the recognition that we really cannot achieve our commercialization mission and the success if these potential markets are not willing to buy ocean energy systems. So our transformational work is to shift from technology-centric development to market-centric development. And now that we have formed a core ocean energy community, which did not previously exist, our work now is to create a market pool for ocean energy systems. And the way that we see accomplishing this is by establishing ocean energy market demonstration sites. A market demonstration site will be a mirror commercial project, such as the one shown here in this image, which is owned and operated by Carnegie Clean Energy, which is a wave energy technology developer. It will be a place where we can bring end users, which will be market suppliers, technology providers, and many others together to prove the commerciality of ocean energy and to generate the understanding of the value that ocean energy can provide to Australia's energy mix. Thank you. Back to you, Nicola.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Certainly, you're creating a whole transformed sector there, which is amazing. And I think what you also highlighted there is the opportunities for many, many cross collaborations with other clusters with some of your work. So thank you, and we'll come back to you again at the end.
Thank you.
We're going to take a very, very quick break because time is getting away from us. So just 2 minutes, please, to get up and have a stretch, grab a coffee if you need one. During that time, we are going to pop up another online poll, and we'd really appreciate if you could provide your responses to that, but see you back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I hope everyone has at least had a short opportunity to have a stretch. And thank you for those who have completed the online poll. Just before we go into our next speaker, perhaps let's have a look at the responses. Well, a fairly conclusive positive response in the first question there. Strong agreement that we certainly are going to see some positive transformational change emerge out of this crisis. Bit of a mixed result there in the second one, but that's probably suggesting that we have got a bit of work to do, particularly in Australia, in relation to our policies and structural arrangements to support that positive transformational change. And the final one, I guess that's also looking like a positive response, and that we've certainly got a lot of leaders who are confident about supporting transformation into the future. So thank you again for participating there. Let's now go to Gippsland in Victoria. I've had the pleasure of working with Karen Kane, CEO at the Latrobe Valley Authority, on the Gippsland Smart Specialisation Strategy for many years. So I'll hand over to Karen and look forward to hearing some more about your work here in our region.
Thank you very much, Nicola. It's a pleasure to be joining people in this great discussion today on transformation with colleagues from around the world. And congratulations to TCI Oceania for organising this event. It's fantastic. My name is Karen Kane. I'm the CEO of the Latrobe Valley Authority. Latrobe Valley, for those people who don't know, is 2 hours east of the city of Melbourne in southern Australia. Now, the photo on the screen in front of you does represent a story of transition and transformation over the last 3 years, and it's just the beginning. It's an historic photo of coal mining in the valley, which has occurred for over 100 years, feeding coal-fired electricity production in this area for the state of Victoria. The authority was set up by the state government of Victoria in the community in 2016 in response to the closure of the first coal-fired power station, Hazelwood, with 5 months' notice, so quite a challenge. We're a government authority, but we are members of this community and we work in our community. We're a team of local people, so we very much understand the commitment that we have to support the change that's going on. This region, the region of Gippsland, is a region that has been dependent for decades now on a traditional resources based economy, both for its workforce and its community. And is a very rich area of Australia. So again, like the Canada story we've heard, really has some wonderful products, but we haven't done much value adding. But this significant shock and change to a major sector here is the basis of our work. So we've taken an approach which is based on the smart specialisation approach of the EU, and for those people who are not aware, the EU Commission has undertaken 2 decades of inquiry into competitive advantages and how you undertake a contemporary regional development approach to understanding what those competitive advantages are in a community and a place. And basically the really important component of this work is to work across 4 sectors, not independently, but in a collaborative way. So industry, education and training, government and community is the core of the collaboration, the way in which we're undertaking the work here in Gippsland. The Gippsland region is now registered on the EU Smart Specialisation platform and is the first region outside of Europe to be registered. that gives us access to very serious research and a lot of collaboration and partners in the EU. So the question is, what does that matter in practice to the work we have here? I think over the last 2.5 years, we've undertaken this approach in partnership with many people, both in the community and beyond. And the really important part of this work is that it's an inquiry through open innovation into a range of potential innovation opportunities across where the assets are in this community. And we are building on the very strong base of the economy that we've had here. And as you can imagine, energy is one of those sectors, which I'll give a bit more detail on in terms of this work. So there are a number of inquiries underway across the region. We're working directly with local government here. We're also working directly with policymakers and within the state government. And the really important part about understanding a place-based bottom-up, but the regulations, the policies, the interventions that a government makes is just as important in terms of our partnership. So one of the themes I wanted to share with you today in a very practical way is in the energy sector. So we are taking the skill and the knowledge and the expertise in the time that we've had, and we're really building our partnership. So at the moment we have 4 themes: community energy, geothermal, smart grids and bioenergy as the open innovation inquiries. We've got 609 people across the region involved in those inquiries, and we're developing a number of innovation opportunities through that collaboration. There are 60 organisations across those 4 sectors, and we're really starting to test some of the innovation here. So before I finish up, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the other themes discussed already. The idea of collaboration index and an innovation benchmarking is underway here as well. We're investigating the importance of multi-level governance and what that means for inclusion and cooperation and collaboration. And Paul, I really appreciated the discussion about the disruption and the disturbances which I think we're undertaking. So I might leave it at there, much more to tell, but I'll hand back to you, Nicola.
Thanks very much, Karen, for just giving us a really short insight to the work that you've been undertaking, and which really reflects, I think, government having a higher risk appetite to do things differently. And it's great to see that gaining traction around the region. So well done. And I know E4 Phelps Williams is in the room or online with us, and E4 does talk about clusters and their smart specialisations. And I think current work in the EU and around the world would highlight that whilst not all clusters will have smart specialisations, clusters and the collaboration and the co-innovation, the connections that we've been talking about here today are absolutely essential for regional smart specialisation strategies. So they really go hand in hand. So thank you again, Karen. Now let's head over to WA, and we're going to hear from Oral Maguire and the work of the Noongar Land Enterprise. Over to you, Oral.
Thank you, Nicola. It's great to be a part of this forum, and I just would like to thank Mariana for the opportunity to present with what has been a very interesting and obviously an international team of presenters. So it's good to be here. I'm presenting from Perth in Western Australia. We are Noongar people. We are the cultural traditional owners of the whole of the Southwest. We're the biggest cultural block, in fact, in Australia, of all the Aboriginal nations of Australia. So we're a significant mob who have nevertheless endured and suffered the same history that has endured or has been forced upon us in the 200 years of colonisation. And so my presentation is really about the changes that we've had to make, which I must say, we are very good adapters. We've achieved the things that we've achieved in our current society in one generation. And so I think terms and concepts of around change and around transformative change sits very comfortably with Aboriginal people and I'm sure Indigenous peoples around the world. I just want to speak about the Noongar Land Enterprise, and I want to particularly speak about a project that we're working on with FIAL and other partners. Yordanian Bar is that project, and it's focused on our bush foods and bush produce industry and the participation of ourselves as Noongar people and traditional owners of our country in the southwest. So Yordanian Bar is a term, really in translation, it's about the binding of people together, particularly within some of the dichotomies of culture or cultural values and cultural responsibility and commercial interests and commercial operations around sacred and scientific knowledges and the issue of current assets and required capability to be successful. So they're very big challenges for us as Aboriginal people. As I said, we are still adapting to opportunities that have been thrust upon us in the last, let's say the last 20 or 30 years. So it's some change is new, but a lot of it is us drawing back to what has been current for 2,000 generations here in Australia. This is a map of Noongar Budja. This is the southwest corner of Australia, of Western Australia. It's roughly 200,000 square kilometres. And Noongar Budja simply means our country, or the country of the Noongar people. We've got 14 clan groups, language groups, so there's diversity in there. The Noongar Land Enterprise we formed in 2012, I guess as a cluster. This is a term that we haven't used before, but it is, I guess, I'm speaking and meeting Miriana, it effectively is a cluster. It's a cooperative that we are very interested to develop and continue to progress. We're an Aboriginal grower group. I believe we're one of the first in Australia. This is our current makeup. We have 8 members. Potentially there's 30 members in the southwest, 20 hectares. Potentially there's about 50,000 hectares. And we operate on these respectful partnerships and around diversity. Our culturally appropriate and commercially driven governance model is what we think is our most transformational driver in what we're endeavouring to do. Our foundational principles are around these issues that we've got named in our diagram here, and it's focused on being able to thrive on change, but being very focused on collaboration. The commercial focus and the cultural responsibilities are also key drivers of our third space model. And one of the biggest issues is allowing us to heal and grow. Healing is an important part of growing in our Aboriginal experience. This is basically our membership, or representatives from our membership. It's a diverse group, as you can see. We have several non-Aboriginal participants with us who are leaders within the organisations that are members. We have a number of elders, and we've got several generations of family associated with our membership. These are important aspects of having a grower group, and what our cluster really focuses on. Providing a voice is a critical part of that. Having structure to deliver important aspects where we can work together. And we've identified some of these key areas. As I said, the bush produce industry is a significant one. It's one where we are very disempowered, and people will see, almost be shocked by the next slide, which will show that, roughly it's a 20 million, currently it's a 20 million per annum industry, and it is growing. Currently, there's about 14 species of the native, particularly plant species, and in the southwest of Western Australia, there are approximately 6,500 species of plants that have been used by Aboriginal people and Noongar people for over 2,000 generations. So that's a potential bush produce sector that can be developed. This is the shock that we currently suffer, in that there is 1% or less than 1% in participation by us as Noongar and Indigenous peoples in this industry. We have some significant challenges around the commercial pursuits, political structures, political requirements, and certainly the intellectual property, and particularly focused on some of the legal challenges. So as a representative body, we look very closely at intellectual property and our focus on representing an appropriate cultural context in the way that we develop or support commercial development of these sort of products. We get very little support from the legal structures, and we pursue that very strongly. These are, you know, the IP around our cultural and sacred knowledge. These sort of structures are very difficult to address as a singular entity. So again, the cluster structure and the importance of having a collective and cooperative group allows us to have a voice in these types of pursuits. These are the project's benefits that we know are important and help us to get through our goals or through our ways of doing business, and they're very important in all the projects that we endeavour to pursue and develop on behalf and with our members. Thank you very much for your time, and sorry that I went a little bit over, but back to you, Nicola.
Thank you so much, Oral. Such inspiring and truly transformational work there. And I'm sure there will be many people here that would love to follow up and learn more and drive greater connections around the opportunities and you know, the work that you're doing across many other regions. So thank you again, and hopefully there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. So now moving across to South Australia, Anne Moroney, CEO at RDA Barossa, this is a mouthful, Anne, Barossa, Gawler, Light, Adelaide, Plains. I hope I've got that right. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I take a slightly different perspective, given that I'm not a cluster manager, but a regional development organisation that absolutely sees and understands the critical importance of clusters in growing the economy with high value jobs and specialisations, giving rise to more clusters and more opportunities as we go. The region currently has 2 operational clusters that I work with. One is the Northern Adelaide Plains Food Cluster, a new emerging cluster, and the other more mature cluster, which I hope you've all heard of, the Barossa Wine Cluster, incorporating food and tourism aspects as well. Now, briefly on the Northern Adelaide Plains Food Cluster, it's based on a population of producers, about 1,500, 1,300 of which are horticulture, veggies and nuts mainly, that have very simple supply chains for the most part and are not organised for collective action other than the various industry bodies, some of which are state-based, some of which are national. So the need and the opportunity for clustering is obvious to those of you, because you're all on this webinar because you're already believers. But the 2 things I'd like to say is, even though that's only been going 8 months, it has a very critical project delivering transformation already, which is in the nature of a waste project. It's using waste, which has been a bugbear of the industry, finding opportunities for new industries around that. So in the very early stages of transformation of cluster development, there's already that transformation shining through, I'd say. So what encouraged the growers to want to come together in a clustering format? Well, the input of economic developers, of course, but they looked across the region to the Barossa Wine Cluster and its global relevance and renown. It's a small area, and they thought, we want a part of that. So the Barossa Wine Cluster is a very mature cluster, but its origins are in community and in place. So what is the magic, that special sauce, I think a previous speaker referred to, that's got the Barossa Wine Cluster as successful as it is? And a few things I'd like to say about that. Start with community. It's deeply embedded in place and in the community and in the culture of the people in the Barossa. You know you have a performing or an established cluster when the drawings from the kindies come home with Berlin Wine Show gold medal sticked all over it, leftover medal stickers. The schools all have performing wine centres, vineyards, wine production areas. The design students design the labels. The marketing students do a sales and marketing campaign, and the school raises money with its wine produce. The consultant winemakers are dads, and it's pretty much a who's who of the Australian wine industry, I assure you. It's festivals, it's wine festivals, are festivals of the community. And I think that's really important because that builds that resilience, that stage one change into the community, which helps it perform highly on other levels and does encourage knowledge transfer right at a grassroots level everywhere in the community. So there are probably 3 stages of transformation of the industry, which are worth noting. One was growth, strategic growth, where large wine companies saw the opportunity in the region. And even though it has a very small production in national terms, all the large companies established there, bringing with them the know-how, the expertise, the appetite for research, that they then shared with the 450 local growers and 175 wine producers, all of whom have quite small, or most of whom have quite small micro businesses, and now take advantage of this huge supply chain logistics opportunity, the education, research and development that goes with that, and the global networks of their peers. In about 2008, a date we've heard a lot of today, but it was in response more to a wine lake which arose through market failure of the high Australian dollar and some massive plantings nationally, to create a crisis that led to the formation of a cluster organisation proper, which replaced a committee of wine and tourism, which was more about marketing. That committee then focused on brand clarity, on market connections and development, on telling the stories, and certainly on excellence at all levels along the value chain. So what's been the result of that? The price of Barossa Shiraz has increased exponentially from, in I think 2008, to $800 to $1,000 a tonne average, up to $3,000 to $4,000 a tonne average. The price of Barossa bottled wine for export has a $9 a litre premium over other Australian regions. So what we're seeing is, you know, the proof is in the pudding of that transformation. We're about to embark upon I just had my time call, embark upon a new transformation wave. And that started with a think tank last year where we got 160 industry members to give 2 days of their working week to come and blue ocean think about the region. That's what you can do with a high-performing cluster. The implementation is a bit slow because of COVID, the next crisis, but what our cluster and the structures within have meant is that the resilience and the structures to deal with COVID effectively, efficiently, and with minimum damage have all been in place. And so the belief is that the third phase of transformation can continue without much interruption, and regional competitive advantage will grow. Thank you. Back to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Anne, and also for sharing your insights there. SA has a really strong history of clustering, and you know, some of the great work is tremendous. You really highlight also, I think, the measurable and demonstrable value that clusters can actually deliver for businesses, which is just so important. Now, last but not least, Andrew Scott. Let's go to Queensland. Andrew is the Executive Chairman at Queensland Robotics. Over to you.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you to the organisers of this fantastic event or series of events. It's been great, and it's been fantastic sitting here listening to all the previous speakers. I've learned so much actually already. So just to quickly introduce Queensland Robotics. So we are a robotics cluster, but we're relatively new. However, we're built upon 30+ years of capability and research that's in the region. We actually boast some firsts globally. and we've got a lot of those people that are responsible for some of those early works still here, still engaged, and still very much an active participant. We've also probably got the largest group of roboticists in Australia here in Queensland, and we've got some fantastic opportunities that are opening up. We're also proudly part of the newly formed the Australian Robotics, which is a national body, which is, I think, probably in our favour to have to be a cluster that's actually part of a national body. So we're really proud of that, and that's going to help us grow the capability nationally and also help us internationally. I just want to also highlight that we're built upon what we've seen globally, and actually the help of some of the other clusters internationally has helped us with this, and that is realizing that we are in a robotic boom. And what I mean by that, and when I say robotics, I'm actually talking about all of the aspects to it. So the sensors, the components, the AI algorithms that make up the necessary bits and pieces to build robotic solutions. So we are in a boom, and Australia is well positioned to be able to take advantage of that boom. And leverage the fact that we've got all of this wonderful test areas and wonderful areas in which to take advantage of. We've got the largest UAV test ground in the world. We've got some great activity that's going on. So our robots that are actually generated in our cluster represent multi-sectors. We've got ocean-going robots, we've got agricultural robots, we've got construction robots, we've got mining robots, and we've got other capabilities that are developing. We're also tightly coupled with the growth of the Australian space industry, and we're a proud supporter of AROSE, which is the Australian Remote Operations for Space and Earth. And there's a lot of capability taking from our ability here to support the space industry. Now, one of the things that I should point out is, and this is a really important point, and something that the national narrative has to change, and that is robots don't mean less jobs. It actually means more jobs. And this has been proven with our folks in Germany. It's also been proven with our friends in the US. And so what we're trying to leverage that, and we're already seeing elements of that already. Now, this crisis has actually accelerated this boom. And so we're taking advantage of that. And so most of our members are actually increasing capability. They're increasing their business. They're growing, they're employing. So it's really good to see that we're responding to the response. Now, one of the things that I want to highlight is that the fact that Australia and New Zealand are going to be coming out of this crisis sooner than many other countries. And so as a result, we're really trying to accelerate some of our programs and capabilities to really support our members going forward. So one is, and building upon one of the points that Serge made earlier around the growth of education and mentoring programs. Mentoring is really important to us and trying to help our businesses within the cluster. The other piece is that one thing we lack here in Australia is investment opportunities. And so we're looking to grow a significant robotic fund to help both startups and growth of the industry. Now, one thing we are proud of is our international relationships. We have a number of really, really strong relationships with other robotics clusters globally. And we're leveraging those relationships to try and help us grow, help us with our capability growth, and also help with the networks. And that's also playing out into our growth of our manufacturing capability. And when I say manufacturing, I'm talking about manufacturing of robots. And so we're growing that capability. And we already have some active programs or projects already underway where we're building, we're manufacturing robots as a service for other international robotics companies. And part of that reason is due to this crisis, they cannot get the supply chain elements that they need, but also they cannot get their products to the countries where their customers want to buy them. So we've got a couple of projects where we're actually helping those companies through our relationships to build those capabilities right here. The other, I guess, piece that I want to just quickly highlight, because I do want to try and help Nicola catch up some time, is that we do want to grow the capability here in Australia, and we're part of the International Association of Robotics Associations. So we're trying to also leverage our capability to grow the robotics industry globally. And that's really all I've got to say. And back to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Andrew, and some amazing, inspiring work underway in your cluster. And I guess what all of the speakers have really highlighted is that there are so many different cluster models out there, but also there are many more opportunities for clusters to actually be connecting with each other, and that we actually need to strengthen our cluster ecosystem here. I'm wondering actually for how many people who are online today, if this is the first time that you've actually been made aware of some of these amazing initiatives that are occurring across Australia. Now, time is slipping away. I'm not seeing a massive number of questions in the Q&A, but if anyone wants to get in quickly, and I'll ask all participants just to make sure your cameras are back on and you can all join in. There is one question that has been sitting here for a while that does perhaps relate to the discussion that we had at the second forum. And the question is around, what are your thoughts on distributed leadership kind of concepts versus some of the existing traditional models of leadership? And I guess what we're talking about here is, as people that are leading transformational change, what do you see as the role of the traditional heroic style leader in contrast to more collective, collaborative, distributed leadership models?
Well, I'm happy to make a comment on that. That certainly it's part of our stage 3 transformation that we're working on, whether we need to bring in associated value chains into the cluster so there's a single voice, or whether this can be achieved through an informal collaborative network where people lead on appropriate topics or issues in a broader cluster group. And I think you need really good communication, understanding and trust for the model. But mind you, a single leader doesn't lead easily if there's no trust there either. So perhaps a horses for courses, but in a complex system, I think the distributed leadership, if it's mature and functional, is a wonderful objective, just has to be done well.
Thank you, Anne.
And Nicola, I can probably comment quickly. So one of the things I think is important to think about with distributed leadership is the concept of tightly aligned and loosely coupled, which underpins the nature of clusters. So I think that's another aspect to look at that.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Anyone else on the panel like to make a comment there?
Nicola, I'd just like to talk about distributed leadership and multi-level governance, and I think these two things go together really, really well. So how do we ensure that we have governance arrangements in a community that are not our traditional governance arrangements, where people can take leadership and contribute to the greater good, and understanding how we can build that system of local-led leadership, but also contributing to and understanding how that ties in with multiple networks and multiple cluster operation.
Thanks, Karen. And I know there's a lot of thinking going on in relation to your work in Gippsland around that as well. Anyone else like to make any comments about that one?
Nicola, I've had the opportunity to work under both models, and there's certainly advantages in both. I think it really depends on much what Anne said, is you have to understand where the leadership needs to happen. You have to understand the people at play, their strengths. And unfortunately, we're going to have to get rid of a lot of the traditional command and control style of leadership, because there are some people working within organizations who just can't deal with a much flatter leadership model.
Thanks very much, Kim. Anyone else that we haven't heard from on the panel like to make a comment around their context? Bill, how does that relate to you in Canada?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what it is that I'm hearing, and what I've seen in terms of trying to get companies engaged in collaborative R&D is that trust is the biggest factor. You can't just take 2 organizations, 3 organizations and put them together and build a project. There has to be trust there. And so that takes, I would contend, more of a distributed leadership model across all of that, because everybody's bringing different skills, everybody's bringing different intellectual property, everybody's bringing different aspects of the market. So I would agree with what I've heard.
Thanks, Bill.
Nicola, from our perspective as Aboriginal people, we come from a very much a collective and consensus leadership model that was always very flat, where several representatives spoke on many of those issues that impacted on the group. And so we struggle with our governance models of the corporate governance challenged by a lot of our cultural governance issues, and that's one of the things that we are struggling with the NLE, and what we're trying to overcome, particularly with regards to the bush produce industry and the way that it is very much corporatised. But those issues go right across all aspects of Aboriginal life. So it's an ongoing struggle for us, but I think there are models, and we like to think that we are building a model that is demonstrating how the corporate and the cultural governance can actually help develop a better leadership model or framework.
Great. Thanks very much, Oral. And I guess just to wrap that conversation up, if we just go back on reflect on some of the comments that Gary was making, it really highlights that if we want deep transformational change, some of the ways of organising, whether it be governance, whether it be the way organisations operate, these need to change in order to remove some of the barriers to genuine transformation. Mm. There is another question, and this will probably unfortunately have to be the last one. I will ask people just to hang on the line for a little bit longer. This is also a very interesting question, and we're probably not going to be able to resolve it quickly today. But on the topic of transformation, what do you see as the role for business associations, chambers, CRCs? There's a whole bunch of other players out there in our innovation ecosystems, RDCs. What do you see as their role in a cluster-based economy or world? Who'd like to have a go at that one?
Well, I could have a stab, because I'm involved in many, and so one of the things, I think this is also contributing to some of the confusion around what is a cluster, what can clusters do versus a CRC and some of these other associations. So in my personal opinion is that I think we all need to work together, and so the CRCs is an important part, and I think most of the clusters that have got a link with some of the CRCs, they're active with those CRCs, but we need to make sure that that's definitely prominent. And the same goes for associations and chambers, and one of the things we've been very fortunate is to have really strong support from RDA and various chambers around the state. And so we've already had that really strong support. So I think that they're part of the quadruple helix, as you mentioned, Nicola. And so I really do see them part of the ecosystem. That's my view anyway.
Thanks, Andrew. Anyone else like to have a go at that one?
I'll add a thought. Right now, I think that CRCs in my particular world is an important entity that complements the type of work that we're doing in our particular cluster. To me, the opportunity is to be able to recognize the strengths of each of our respective organizations and be able to create something that's greater than the parts, to create a whole that's greater than the parts, and so that we can really achieve the purpose and the missions that we strive for, and do it in truly a collaborative effort. I have seen and experienced in this early stage just a lot of competition amongst these different organizations, unfortunately, instead of thinking about how we create something bigger. So I think that's a part that we're all going to have to keep working on and encouraging our colleagues to achieve.
But I think as E4 calls them, the clutter are absolutely essential. You know, the clusters are out there to help create that transformational change, but without the support that we've had from organizations like FIAL, like our local chambers, like our different industry groups, we wouldn't be able to share that the opportunity for transformational change that much further and wider.
All right, thanks very much, Stephanie, and thanks very much, Kim. An important conversation there, but I guess it's going back to the heart of what clustering is about and ensuring the collaboration and the alignment is there, particularly in this very busy and crowded space that we have in Australia. We are going to have to, unfortunately, wrap it up here. There's been some amazing discussions, some amazing conversation, and we've covered so much ground in such a short time. We've got everybody online. I just really encourage all of just making sure I'm getting messages here. Yes, okay. That all of the participants could give all of our amazing speakers and panelists a virtual clap. I can see comments on the chat. All of our panelists are very generous in their time, and if you would like to contact and follow them up, there will be contact details that will appear on the screen in a moment. So thank you so much to all of our speakers. You've been truly amazing. I hope the webinar, today's theme, Exploring Transform, has provided you all with some insight, into the inspiring work of others that is occurring across Australia and across the globe, and that it may have also provided you with some new connections and stimulated some thinking for you and your operating environment. Our challenge clearly is not to revert to the views that we had prior to the crises, but to keep looking for new answers and better ways of doing things. The phase after the pandemic, I guess, is going to be a test of our collective and individual ability to create positive futures. And it's been so encouraging and inspiring to hear some of the work that has been presented today that is really driving transformative change. So thank you again to all of our speakers. Many thanks to all of our participants for being with us again. We really do appreciate your feedback, and at the end of today's webinar in particular, we're very interested in learning around what kind of follow-up and support you would like to see after this series. We know we've covered, again, a lot of ground in a very short period of time, and we're very keen to hear your ideas around how we can support more connectivity. I'm just going to say, again, a very quick thank you to all of our sponsors who've got behind this three-part series: the Australian Government through the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources, FIAL, NERA, METS Ignited and RDA Brisbane. And a particular thanks to the entire team who've been pulling this event together. That's particularly my TCI Oceania co-chairs, Tracy Scott-Remington, Dr. Mariana Preca of FIAL, and to also members of the FIAL team, Vicky Wright in particular, who's been doing a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to make this all happen. And thank you, Don and Rosie and the whole team at Events Beyond for making the technology work for us so seamlessly. I'm going to hand over just very quickly now to TCI Network President Merete Daniel Nielsen, who has joined us from Denmark. A very, very early start from you, Merete, but thanks so much for being with us. And I'll say goodbye and thank you, and over to you, Merete.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you so much. And really big congratulations to what you've done here. It's been amazing to follow this impressive work over the last 1.5 months. You say that you don't collaborate so much in Australia or down under, but I mean, I really see a lot of that happening. So many strong clusters, so many inspiring stories, very strong ecosystems, a lot of international and global collaborations. It's been a true joy to see this over the last 1.5 months. So big thanks for what you've been doing, organizing this with Mariana, Tracy Scott Remington and yourself, Nicola, doing a great job moderating. Thanks to the sponsors and everybody pulling this together. I just did a brief count. I think we gathered around 250 participants. Also really a great achievement. So seen from the global perspective from TCI Network, you are of course happy to join us as a member. It could be great to see more clusters, more participants coming in from down under. And just a very brief finalizing, what we are working really hard on right now is a TCI recovery playbook. I know Mirjana found time in her busy schedule to give us some feedback, so thanks for that, Mirjana. But it's trying to be brief, 3 phases. It's about how clusters and economic development organizations can support companies and ecosystems during this crisis we are in the middle of. So it's about the first phase, mobilizing crisis response. We see that a lot. We are now perhaps some places in Europe and in Australia are living the pandemic because we got the pandemic under control. And now we are trying to focus on how to ignite the new growth. We did talk a bit about today the smart specialization strategies, so there will be more inspiration in the playbook on how to get that right. We have a lot of, also like today, great stories from around the world and how both clusters and economic development organizations have responded, so that hopefully that can inspire as well. And we have some general recommendations on how to transform, because this is really extremely crucial and important right now, that we have spent a lot of resources on trying to deal with this, and we have to be much smarter in the next phases in rebuilding our economies. So thank you from my side, and we will be back with the recovery playbook in June, and inviting everybody to join that conversation on how to ignite the new growth. Thank you.